Hi, this is Pavel with a C# exercise from the book Visual C# 2012 How to Program. We are going to do exercise 17 from the chapter 8. We will be rolling some dice. Alright, so we are going to write an app that simulates the rolling of two dice. The app should use an object of class random once to roll the first die and again to roll the second die. In other words, there will be random rolls for both die. And the sum of the two values should then be calculated. So die 1 plus die 2. Alright, now each die can show an integer value from 1 to 6, obviously. So the sums of the values will vary from 2 to 12. Which is obvious. I mean, the lowest sum of two dice is 2. 1 plus 1 is 2, and the highest is 6 plus 6, which is 12. So with 7 being the most frequent, and 2 and 12 the least frequent. The reason, obviously, is that, again, the sum of 2 can be, in order to get the sum of 2, both die have to roll 1. That's the only option. For 7, the first die can roll 1, the other one can roll 6, or 2 plus 5, or 3 plus 4, or 4 plus 3, So that's why number 7 should be represented the most. Now your app should roll the dice 36,000 times. It's a lot of times. But I'm sure my computer can manage that. Use a one-dimensional array to tally the number of times each possible sum appears. So in other words, we will be keeping count of each sum, and then we will display the result in tabular format. So we will determine whether the totals are reasonable. In other words, if let's say there are 6 ways to roll 7, like I said, and so approximately 1/6 of the rolls should be 7. Alright, in other words, we will kind of try to figure out if the random is truly random. Alright, let me start. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to get the array. I'll call it an array of sums, and I'll instantiate it right here. Now, I'm going to use 13 elements. The reason why I'm going to use 13 elements, remember the sums, the lowest possible sum is 2. So the index 1 and index 0 I will simply ignore. I will simply start counting from the index 2, which will represent the sum of 2. And the index 12 will represent the sum of 12. And of course, like the index 7 will represent the sum of 7. So each time I will roll a sum of 2, then I will add plus 1 to index 2. If I roll 7, then I will add 1 to my index of 7. In other words, index of 7 will hold the, we will be adding to it each time the sum is 7. So at the end of the whole loop, it will hold the number of times, the index 7 will hold the number of times the sum of 7 was rolled. I hope it will make a little more sense when I start coding. Okay, so and we actually need an integer of the sum for each roll of the dice. Okay, so we of course need a random. I'll just call it rand and instantiate it right here. Alright, and that's all we really need. We can start looping right now. So 4, and I will start the again, we are going to start from the index 2. Like I said, that represents the sum of 2. So 4 integer I equals 2, and I is less than or equal to 12, because we are taking 12 is the maximum, but included. 12 is the last, is 6 plus 6 of the sum. And of course I plus plus. Now, since they want us to output this in like a tabular manner, before that I'll do like a little header, console.write line, right line, and over here it will simply be like a header for each sum. So the sum of 2, sum of 3, sum of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I'll space it out maybe a little more. We'll figure out how the spacing goes. So this will be the header, and maybe, yeah, well, that's good enough. And now we will simply, calculate the sum of the dice. So, in order for us to do that, this is going to be our output. Before that output, we need to do the calculation itself. I just wanted to kind of design the whole thing, how it's gonna flow. Alright, so over here we will output the results, but the results themselves we need to put in another loop, the 36,000 time loop. Alright, so for, and we go to integer I equals 0, and I is less than 36,000, and I plus plus. Now in this case it doesn't matter that we start from 0, we simply loop 36,000 times, that's all. Okay, so now what do we do here within this loop? Now we need to roll a die. So in order for us to roll the die, I probably should have created an integer of die 1. I'll initialize it to 0, and an integer of die 2, which I will initialize to 0. And I will now assign a random number to both. So our die 1 will equal to a random number of the integer from 1 included and 7 excluded. In other words, it's 1 through 6. And the same with the die 2. So it's the random dot next 1 and 7. Okay, so now we have the die and we can simply sum them up. We can figure out the sum very simply. Sum equals die 1 plus die 2. So this is our sign for each iteration of the loop. We will have 36,000 of these. So we need to we need to add this sum to our array depending on the index. Again, if the sum equals 2, we will add plus 1 to our index number 2. If the sum equals 7, we will add 1 plus to the index number 7, and so forth. So we will simply do our sums, which is the array, and the index we're looking for is the sum. And all we do is increase it by 1. We start from 0, and when we roll a die that equals to certain sum, we will increase that index to by 1. So at the end of 36,000 loops or iterations, the sum will hold indexes, the sums array will hold each index will hold the number of times each sum was rolled. And that's all for the calculation. Now we can simply output the results, which is going to be a simple console.writeLine, console.write, not writeLine, just write actually, because we will be writing them in a column kind of manner. So what do we write? I'll do some spacing there. I'll have to adjust the spacing probably once I see how it outputs, and we'll output a number of with 4 digits. 4 because that way they will be all the same, like the same length. In other words, if it's, let's say, 900, it would be 0900. So, and the number that we are actually passing here is the the array and the index of I. Remember, we're starting from 2, so we will ignore the index 0 and 1. So again, index 2 will output the number of sums that were 2. 3 will output a number of 3s, and so forth. And at the end, I will simply do console.readline just to pause the screen. Alright, so that's really all there is to this. And let me run that and see what we get. Anytime soon, hopefully. Come on. Okay, so I have the output. I'll just have to format it better, but basically you see that the sum of 2 was rolled 967 times. Sum of 12 was 1018 times. Number 3 was 1972. But anyway, and you can see that 7 and 8 were the highest. So yeah, it was fairly random, I guess. But let me just adjust the spacing here for the header. So I don't know if this is gonna work. We'll see. But the calculation is working. How it displays is just a matter of, you know, adjusting the spacing. Okay, so I adjusted the spacing, so now you have it, you know, in a nice column. So, but you can see that the numbers of 2 and 12 are the least, which they should be. Like I said, you can only roll 1 and 1 to get the sum of 2, or 6 and 6 to get the sum of 12. And now, for example, this roll, the 7 was truly the highest sum rolled. So yeah, it seems to be working fairly decently. Now I'm going to show you one more thing. We will have to actually kind of verify these numbers. We are going to capture each roll. We will capture each roll for die 1 and as well as die 2. Because remember, like for example, sum of 4 can be 1 plus 3, like die 1 could be 1, die 2 can be 3, or both die can be 2, or die 2 can be 1 and die 1 can be 3. You know, so there's more options for these, and I want to see what roll you know, was the most what kind of combination rolled the most. Now, in order to do that, we are going to use some other arrays. In fact, we are going to use the two-dimensional arrays. So over here, I will declare another array, integer, and it's going to hold the rolls for die 1 and die 2. So in other words, this portion before the comma will be for die 1, and after the comma will be for die 2. And I'll call this, let's say, die values, and I will instantiate it to new integer of two-dimensional array, and it's going to be 7 and 7. The reason for that is the values each die can have is from 1 to 6. So again, I will be ignoring the index 0, and I will simply take the index 1 and to index 7, which would be the value of 6 for both dies. I will capture in the same way like we did over here. I will capture each roll. I will simply be adding +1 to each of the combinations. All right, so I'll go back to 36,000 over here and do a little adjustment. Basically, the only thing I have to do, I have to add this sum, not the sum, but the roll for each die to our die values. So our die values, and the first one would be the value of die 1, and the second one will be of value of die 2. So this way, we are going to capture each roll for each die. The same way, plus equals 1. We will simply add 1 to that particular roll. And that's all. Now we simply have to output it. Yeah, we can output it after that, for example. So it's gonna be another, I'll do it in another tabular manner. So console dot write line, and this time we are not capturing the sums, we are capturing the rolls. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, for each die. And let me just do a little console dot write line, and I will simply output something like some line, like underline. This is just a header. So again, we are doing a tabular kind of output. All right. So as for our loop, so I'll do for integer, and now we'll have a row and a column. Remember, we have two-dimensional array. So the first one will do the row. So and we start from index 1. Again, there's no 0 on any die, so we are capturing index 1 as first. And r is less or equal to 6, because we have 6 sides on each die, and r plus plus. So this is going to give us the row, and within that we are going to get the column. But before we do that, we're going to output the row for each of the roles. So our console.write, and it's gonna be similar like what we did before, just some spacing, and I will do I don't know, 0. It's going to be a number, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Actually, now that's going to be, yes, this is going to be the like the header for the row. This is the header for the column. Now it will simply say like the header for the row. So it's just a simple value, simple number, maybe like a separator or something. You'll see how this is going to print. This is a little of the r. In other words, r will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it's going to look like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 like this, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 down. All right, and within that, or after we except I put the semicolon in a wrong line. All right, so after that, we output the actual raw number, again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. We are going to output the values themselves. So 4, and it's going to be a column, so I'll just name it C, and again we start from 1, and C is less or equal to 6. This is going to basically be like a square, so 6 by 6. Each die has 6 sides, and C++. And within this, we will output the values that are in our die values two-dimensional array. So we will do a console.write, and again, there's some spacing. I will adjust that later. And again, there's going to be 4 digits, so they kind of line up nicely. And the value that is going to be printed is simply the die values of the indexes R. That's going to be our first index, and the second is the C. All right, so R and C. Now, after we reach the end of the line, we do a console.write line to move to the next line. So we will do console.write line after the inner loop is finished. In other words, after this loop is finished, we'll move to the next line and come back here, and r will now equal to 2, and we will loop until all 6 are printed. So let me see how that looks. Okay, I have problems with the spacing, which I expected. This is the first, these are just the sums, or the totals of each sum that was rolled. And here, let me just adjust the heading, and I'll be right back. Okay, I have it adjusted, so now when I run it, I get here the output. Now let me just move this one more line down, so this table is separated from this one. So over here, before I output anything, I'll simply do console.writeLine just to go on a new line. So just for the visibility purposes, and it didn't really do anything. Maybe one more. Alright, so here it is. So these are our totals. And this, now it moved. Anyway, this would be the, for example, this is the die 1, and this is the die 2. So the die 1 and die 2 rolled 1, in other words 1 and 1, 977 times, which, as you can see, matches. The sum of 2, 1 plus 1, is 977. Again, the die 1 rolled 6, and the die 2 rolled 6, 1014 times, which is the sum of 12, which matches. So this way you can actually see, you know, how the values are, how the match. So let me just adjust that a little bit, just so we can see it even better, because I'm going to get a calculator now. And let's calculate the sum of 3. It says 2070. So now, how can we get a sum of 2? If die 1 rolls 1 and die 2 rolls 2, so it would be 1079 right here. So it's 1079 plus, another way to do it is if die 1 rolls 2 and die 2 rolls 1, right? So we could reverse them. So that would be 991, right? So we go 179 plus 991, and we get 2070, and the sum of 3 was rolled 2070. We can do one more, let's say 4. Now in order to get 4, the die 1 can roll 1 and die 2 can roll 3, which is right here. So it's 1008. 1008 plus, another way would be if both of them roll 2, which is 1012. So it's plus 1012. And finally, if the die 1 rolls 3 and the die 2 rolls 1, so that would be 998 plus 998, and we get 3018, which you see is 3018 for the sum of 4. So yeah, this is how it works. Not too complicated. It's just, you know, I know the arrays are not an easy subject, especially for beginners, and especially, you know, two-dimensional arrays. But you have to look at them. When it's a two-dimensional array, basically you have a tabular format. You have rows, which is this loop, and then you have columns, which is the inner loop. And within the inner loop, you output the actual row within, because in other words, you'll start with index 1 and 1, then 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, and so forth until you get 1 and 6. Then you move to a new line, and then you have index 2 and 1, 2 and 2, 2 and 3, and so forth. So, and this way you output each row, and if you have a header like this, you know, it looks kind of like a table. Over here we just used a regular array. You know, we made our header, and then we looped, we started from index 2 because that was the minimum sum available when you roll 2 dice, and and the maximum was 12, 6 plus 6. And in each line, since this is only one line, we basically output the number of how many times 2 happened, or 3 or 4 and so forth, which was calculated very simply. Over here we got the die 1, which randomly selected number from 1 through 6, die 2 the same way, and we added them together. Now when we were summing them up, we simply used our regular array, and for each index that the sum equal to, in other words, if sum equal to 3, that was our index. Sum equal to 3, so index 3, add 1 to it, because it just we just get another occurrence of the sum 3. Over here with the two-dimensional array, it was a little different, because we are not capturing the sums of the roll. We were capturing whatever the each die rolled. So we were capturing die 1 and die 2. So if die 1, let's say, rolled 2, then the index was 2, and if die 2 rolled, let's say, 3, so we have the index 2 and 3, and we increased it by 1. Alright, so I hope it's a little clearer. Again, this is arrays. If you're just starting out, or if you're a beginner, this is more of a you just have to practice. You'll get it, don't worry. But I hope this was at least a little helpful, and I'll see you next time. Take care.